Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Derbyologist, and joining me again as co-host Capping with Candace. Candace here. Candace, we got a big week ahead of us in terms of Derby preps, but first off, let's take a look back at last week, and it was a championship series race, and it was in New York, the Big A, and we saw Shagaf pick up the victory.
We did. I think, we spoke last week about saying that he was one of the few truly unexposed types in that field. So it's always a positive when you see a horse like that take a step forward. And I thought he did in that race. I know that the speed figure perhaps hasn't come back what people were looking for, but he did what he's supposed to do. He went and he won well, and that's all you're asking for. So I think that this is a horse who, it almost seems like he still is flying a little bit under the radar, even though he's piled up wins in his short career thus far. But I think this is a horse that people have to be reckoned with because he really is a versatile sort, and I think that there still is more improvement to come from him than there is, necessarily from some of the others.
Yeah, I thought it was impressive. One of the things you don't see very often, and it isn't going to show that in the past performances, if you watch the replay, out of the gate, he had the lead for about the first 15, 20 feet, and then right before the first call position, Leoban took the lead. So in the past performances, it's going to look like Leoban led all the way around. But I just thought that was pretty interesting. A lightly raced horse like that, he had enough speed to take the lead, and then they just eased him back and came off the rail. And then, even on the turn, when the jockey asked him to go out to the middle of the track, he just ambled out there. And yeah, it was a long, slow grinding final quarter, but he got the win. I guess I would have been more disappointed if he kind of would have just hung out there in the middle of the track.
Yeah, the same, and we know how that track was playing too. It was really favoring inside speed, so I thought it was a heads-up ride to have him up along the rail most of the way and then just angle him out to the middle of the track. And we see wins like that sometimes when horses are against some sort of a bias. If you remember last year, we saw it with Untappable on the Pennsylvania Derby undercard where she faced pretty strong inside speed bias. She was out no man's land in the middle of the track, and it didn't look pretty, but she got the win. And ultimately, that's what you're looking for at this point. He's got the win. He got the points. He still, I think, like I said, I still think he has more improvement to come. And, in the end, he did have to run against the bias for those last few hundred meters. And to me, that's probably more why it was kind of a grindy, slow finish. But class ultimately reigned supreme there.
Looks like the top two are going to go separate ways. Right as of right now, it looks like Shagaf is going to go back to Big A. He's actually going to stay there and train and run in the Wood Memorial, and then Leoban is going to go to the Bluegrass and take his kind of speed on the road, which I think is actually good for Leoban. I mean, I kind of wish he wasn't a maiden still, but I think running at those different tracks and trying out different surfaces maybe down the road could pay him some benefits and things like that. So I thought it was a good, solid race. Adventus ran a nice race in third. He just kind of seems to be one of those horses that he's kind of up against it. I think he's got talent, and ultimately he could get a nice win, but it just seems like he either gets the wrong bias or the bad trip, or he's always one race behind.
It seems that way, and we've talked at this time of the year in past seasons about how some of these horses have a winning move. They can go and win a race, whereas some of these are maybe a bit more one pace. They run even races, and they win when races sort of fall into their lap against this sort of company. And that's what Shagaf showed here versus the others, is that he has that move in his arsenal around the turn where he can go win a race. And that kind of ends up being what separates the men from the boys at this point.
Well, this week we have something new on Down to the Wire. There's some people on social media, on Twitter, that have joined together, and they kind of wanted to take the pulse of social media and Twitter and come up with a poll, and they're calling it Derby Dudes, and they'll release it every Monday. And it's under the account @CashWinningTickets. And so you can find that and follow him. His handle is Kentucky Derby Fever. So he's a big Kentucky Derby Fever fan. And I thought we'd kind of talk about this poll. I'm not a big fan of polls, Candace, until we get to March, because I just think too many horses haven't run until then. And it's that eternal debate. Are you picking the horses that you think have a better chance of winning the Derby, or are you picking the better horses that have already ran and kind of showed some talent? So kind of give me some of your thoughts as you take a look at the top seven.
Well, for me, the biggest thing, and I said it to you right away when I saw, was that Mohaymen's on top, which isn't necessarily surprising, but that Nyquist is third. And that's where these polls become interesting, because I think for me, if you're going off of what these horses have accomplished to date, I would put Nyquist on top. But if you're going which horse perhaps has the highest ceiling as far as talent is concerned, then you go Mohamed. More Spirit there in second to me is interesting. I think he has potential, but I'm not sure he's really even the best horse in California yet. Even though he's the most proven, he's going to face a salty group in the San Felipe, which we're going to be talking about soon. So he's the one that kind of stands out to me as being there in second. But the others all sort of make sense to me. I thought Gunrunner ran well last time out in Victory. I think people are underrating him still a little bit, despite it seeming like he was everybody's wise guy horse and he won. An Exaggerator, I'm not sure we totally know what he has to offer yet. He's running well without winning. His biggest win did come over a wet track, and that is my concern, that his peak performances are going to come over wet surfaces. But there is some talent there, and if anything, he's gritty. And maybe that's the main thing about this group in general, is it doesn't seem like we have a ton of, you know, real stars, but they're really gritty types that give it everything they have. And, you know, that's something to be respected, and perhaps that's why some of these races this time are being, you know, a little bit more competitive than we saw in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and we're going to see Brody's Cause. We're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Derby in a few minutes. And then Mo Tom, you know, he's never ran a bad race. You know, I think he kind of sits right there at number 7, because people are reluctant to put him in the top 3 because they're not sure he's going to win a lot of races in a row with his running style. But he does fit class-wise with any one of those horses, and it's not like, you know, you put him in any one of those races, he's going to be 4, 5, 6 to 1 in any of the preps.
He is, and I wonder if ultimately in this group he's one of the stronger stayers and might be able to improve as he goes over further distances. I never thought I would say that about him, but now, having seen him run again this year, I think he kind of shapes like a horse who might ultimately really want 10 furlongs.
All right, well, that's a look at the Derby Dudes poll this week. We're going to be releasing that every week on Down to the Wire. And kind of interesting, like you say, because I think the one thing with polls is you're always wondering, okay, are they picking a horse to win the Derby at this time? Or are you taking most talent? Or are you taking record to date? And I think everybody kind of, you know, it's kind of like most valuable player. Is it the team on the player on the best team that wins the most, or is it the player who has the best stats? So, but we'll get a chance to see a couple of these matchups, and a few of these horses are running this weekend. So looking forward to releasing that every week. And at Cash Winning Tickets is the official releaser of the poll every week. Let's take a look at this week's races. And first, let's go to Florida, and we've got the Tampa Bay Derby. There was 3 or 4 horses that have been pointing for this race all along, and then kind of a couple of late additions to the field. I think this is a deep field. It's got some speed, it's got some closers, and it's got some tricky reads with horses coming off layoffs.
That it does. I mean, this race for a while has been the race we've been looking forward to, specifically for the return of Brody's Cause, who was well thought of as a juvenile. And I think that's a horse many believe is one of the few who really could not necessarily stay 10 furlongs, but thrive over 10 furlongs, improve for added distance. So it's very interesting to see him back, and I know it's something a lot of us have been waiting for. I'd expect him to go well here just because it has been the long-term plan. So you would expect him to be cranked for a trainer who does very well off these sorts of layoffs. We also get Destin in here, who won the Sam F. Davis, and I know you really liked him going into that race, but it was a little bit of a surprise for me to see him win that race, considering how poorly I thought he had ran the race before. But he certainly fits here off his last performance, and maybe he just really takes to the surface here at Tampa Bay. I don't know, where do you see Destin? Because I know you're a big fan of the horse.
I'm a big fan just because I was a huge fan of Creative Cause, his full brother. He was one of those horses that I think he may have peaked a little bit too soon. His Santa Anita Derby was really strong. His San Vicente was really strong. And I think he just kind of peaked a little bit too soon, and then he kind of got injured in the Preakness. He looks exactly like him, very athletic, long legs, so I'm not so sure if he's going to have a real long racing career. One of the things I did like about that race, though, was the gallop out. Like, he really galloped out well in that race, and every once in a while I say, you know, every once in a while you can kind of see the light bulb turn on. So I'm just wondering if that may have been kind of the light bulb turning on. Before we get into our selections, I wanted to talk about Awesome Banner. Interesting that he ships right back after you know, I think universally a lot of people were kind of critical of that last effort against Mohaymen.
Yeah, I think I was one of the ones that was critical of it, and I think a lot of others were. I mean, he didn't necessarily have the smoothest trip, but I don't think that that in any way justifies how poorly he ran in that spot. So I'm just certainly surprised to see him wheeling straight back. I mean, I think you have to look at it a little bit as a sign of confidence that maybe, you know, that just wasn't his day. He wasn't feeling it. They packed it in, and that's why he was so far back. But I would be tough to take him in here because that it was just abnormally bad. It wasn't him. I mean, even if you didn't think that he was going to beat Mohaymen in the Fountain of Youth, I don't think anybody predicted him to run that poorly.
And they did wrap him up on the turn. So maybe something was wrong. You know, interesting thing, he does get a local rider, and that rider is a speed jock. So I think it fits him. It's just hard for me to endorse off that effort because it looked kind of more flat. And sometimes when horses run flat this time of the year, maybe it's a sign that they're tailing off. But let's kind of take a look at the field. Morning Fire set the pace in the Sam F. Davis and gave way. Now he's got to face a couple more horses going for the lead. Outwork stretches out, and then you get Awesome Banner. And I assume Banner is going to be near the front end.
You think so, and that makes life tough for all three of them, I'd say. I certainly see the likelihood of a contested pace up here. And, you know, I think it's going to make for a truly run race because you have those speed horses, you have the pressers in here, and you have the closers. So I think this is a race where, you know, when you have these sort of scenarios, these are races where you don't necessarily expect as many fluke results. You're going to probably have a really truly run race. And I think it makes it tough on the pace setters, especially because Tampa can be a little bit of a tiring surface at times. But I would be looking elsewhere. I don't think I want Outwork or Morning Glory or Awesome Banner especially. But I think of the pace setters at Outwork, it's probably has the most talent of the three. But he was kind of missing in action for quite a while before he resurfaced before. So obviously, you know, he's had some setbacks in the past, but his last run was quite good. I just think the distance is probably the biggest concern for him here.
Yeah, Outwork, you know, one of the things I wrote on DRF Formulator in my race notes for his last race was that he looked like a sprinter, but I think he's a good one. I mean, I thought that was a fast, impressive race that he ran. So, I mean, I don't really know what that means. That's just kind of my own personal handicapping note, I guess. And then before we get into our picks, I was impressed with Star Hill's win. Just visually, I thought he really improved. But, man, he's facing a tall order here going up against some pretty hard-knocking horses.
That he does. And before his win, he came out of one of the more productive maiden races that we've seen to date, the one won by Boat Hall with Kelly Tuff in their second. Kelly Tuff, you know, all of them came back to win, and Kelly Tuff has since, again, finished second in an allowance company, I think just last weekend behind Azar. So, you know, there definitely is some form lines that have held up really well for him, but I do query whether or not he really is fast enough here. And while I think that he does have some more improvement left in him, I'm going to be looking elsewhere.
Well, I'm going to start off with kind of a couple of horses that I'm focusing on. First off, I kind of agree with you. I think I like the fact that there's speed in here. I think that they're all legitimate speed. And if they were any of the three were lone speeds, they could be a threat to run first or second. But I think that's going to negate each other out. Two horses that I'm really focusing in on. I thought Rafting may have made a move a little bit too soon the last time. He was coming off almost a 2.5-month layoff. He'd had a nice string of works. Now, he's only had one work since that last race, but it was a 6-furlong work. So I'm looking at Rafting as my top selection. And I think he's going to be 5-6 to 1 in this type of race. And then also Economic Model. At first, I didn't really like him on the stretch out, but you know, I went back and looked through all the notes, and you know, he worked out 4 or 5 straight workouts in company with Shagaf. And I just think Chad Brown has really thought highly of this horse all along. And maybe on paper, he kind of looks average, but the fact that he keeps on working out with Shagaf and the exact same times, every single time they finished with the exact same workout time. So, I mean, I know you can time them so that they come to a time, but sometimes you try to do that and one horse beats the other one. So maybe he's got a little bit of talent. So those are the two that I'm leaning for. I'm going on top with Rafting. I just think Brody's Cause is going to need a race, and I'm really going to be watching him. I just think he's going to be a little bit under bet, and I hate playing a deep closer off a long layoff.
Well, I'm with you on my top choice. My top choice in here is going to be Economic Model. I like this horse. I liked his debut. I thought he ran really well, but while still looking a little green, a little unprofessional. And I thought that his first run and only run in 2016 was pretty nice. I mean, I thought he made a nice little middle move behind Awesome Banner, who in that race was low in speed, and he's not going to be that here. So I think, he's not a horse who wants to go overly far, so I'd be sketchy with him if this was any further than a mile and a 16th. But he's 5 flatter out of a Quiet American mare. Kind of a mile is probably right up his alley. So I think he is a type who could, perhaps sit in sort of a pressing spot just in behind those leaders and just kind of take over on the turn.
What about, do you think Rafting and Destin, who do you think is maybe the better two in this race of those two?
I mean, for me, I think Destin's probably the better horse. I think I agree with you that Rafting made a move too soon, but in the end, he did finish a fair ways behind him, so it would be difficult for me to see him sort of overturning that form this quickly, because he was a couple lengths back. So I think that Rafting, maybe for me, is just a little bit more one pace than I originally thought he was.
The other thing I did want to mention is, because it's been in my notebook ever since the Champagne, but Talus Saval, that was a day that it was raining the entire day, and it was really sloppy, and the inside at the rail was a big quagmire. And I thought Talus Saval ran really fast fractions that day, and really ran his heart out, and it looks like a poor performance. I think this horse has got some talent. Again, a long layoff. I don't really know where he sits with. I think he's more of a presser. I think he kind of had to show speed in the Champagne, but this is a horse that I'm going to be watching warm up, watching the race, because I think they're going to do the same thing as Brody's Cause. I think they're going to do the Tampa Bay and then the Bluegrass double.
Yeah, I agree that his Champagne was sneaky good, and that was a race where nobody was going to catch Greenpoint Crusader, who I think we can all see is pretty much a slot freak. So yeah, I thought he ran a nice race out there in front, like you say, going very quickly. I don't know what to expect from him here. It's a little bit of the X factor. I wouldn't expect him to win coming off the long layoff for this barn. They struggle with that. But I do think there is some talent there. I just wonder if this surface might be a little bit tricky for him. He did win at Saratoga, so he could handle a little bit testing surfaces when he's going shorter distances, but a mile and a 16th over, a deep Tampa track, the jury's out a little bit on him for me. I wonder how good he is, and I wonder where he's going to be in running. So he's a little bit of the X factor here. I wouldn't use him to win, and I'm not going to be using him in my plays, but where he turns up in running, as far as if he's pressing the pace or if he pulls back a little further because they're worried about him getting the trip, that could have a big effect on this race.
Well, I think that one, has some potential. We're both going to kind of be watching Brody, so I'm going with Rafting over Economic Model. You're going with Economic Model, and we both think that pace and kind of position could be some of the key factors in that race. Now we go to Santa Anita. Again, not quite as many horses, 7-horse field, but on a lot of handicappers, Triple Crown hopefuls, 4 of these 10 horses, 7 horses are in the top 10. Exaggerator, More Spirit, and Danzing Candy, and just a really solid field. And kind of, again, it looks like 5 or 6 of these horses are pressers. And so, like, which one's going to have to take the lead and who's going to get shuffled back a little bit is kind of the key to the handicapping.
It really is. Several of these horses go forward. We've seen Uncle Lionel go forward. Dancing Candy's gone forward. I Will Score, obviously, has gone forward along with Smokey's Image. So there's a lot of speed, and you'd probably expect that for this sort of a race in Southern California, because it's a track that I wouldn't say it's overly biased, as people say, but it definitely favors front runners at times. So you'd expect a lot of those types to show up in kind of a mid-season race like this for younger horses. I think pretty highly of Danzing Candy. I loved his win last time out, and I know people are really getting all over that win, saying that the track was overly biased that day because a lot of leaders won. But when I went back and reviewed the races and reviewed the sectionals, I didn't see any kind of a crazy bias. I saw a lot of races that were run at fairly slow tempos, and that's why leaders won. So I wouldn't be, saying he benefited from any kind of a bias, which is, I know it's something I've seen out there, and it's something I firmly disagree with. But he's a nice horse. I mean, this is a horse who, he has speed, but I'm not sure he needs the lead because he just relaxes so well.
Yeah, Danzing Candy. See, I think that's a horse that, if you look at his first two races, now he did have some trip trouble in the first race. And then the second race, I think he was just better than those horses and was ridden, he was well meant that day. And then the last race, he was just a better horse. A better horse is just going to go to the lead. And so I don't think he needs the lead. Now, I do find it interesting because, again, another horse who I think is maybe being a little miscast is I Will Score. The last time I liked him because I thought he could do the theft job. He's worked out consistently since that last race. But the last race, I just don't think that was a fair indicator of his ability. And I'm not picking him again. I just think this horse is a little better than people think he is. He just gets another tough pace scenario, and he may be stuck again on the lead. And I'm not so sure this horse wants the lead. I just think he's got natural speed, and he might get stuck there again.
That's it. I mean, he has that gate speed. He shoots out of the gate faster than so many of these do, and he finds himself on the lead. And what do? You don't want to strangle him back off the lead, and especially against this sort of a field, you can't afford to do something like that. So I think we could easily see him back on the lead again. He didn't go overly fast last time, and he's still, wilted late. I thought he ran a credible race, but it's hard to see him, beating the two who beat him last time.
Smokey's Image is undefeated, and he's got a mixed reaction. There's some people that are skeptical of him, and there's others that think he's the second coming of California Chrome.
Yeah, for me, visually is what's the put-off for Smokey's Image. I think he's a decent horse, but I know you and I have talked about this privately, that when you see him, he has a pretty high stride, and it's kind of an inefficient stride. So I worry that as distances increase, will he lose more ground to the horses who have kind of those longer, more efficient strides? Ultimately, I wonder if Smokey's Image will end up being a turf miler. The talent is there, but this is a tougher group than he's faced, and he's probably going to have a little bit of pressure out front. Again, he's the one who doesn't need the lead, but I do think he runs best when he's up on the lead. Last time out, we remember that he pulled himself to the lead. So while he has won from off the pace in the past, and people will probably use that to say, hey, they can pull him to the back, he was pretty headstrong last time, so it just is something to keep in mind and something I don't like, knowing there is other speed in here.
And then another addition to this field, More Spirit, I Will Score, and Uncle Lionel faced off the last time. But now we get Cupid, who had a big win, and this kind of continues a trend in this crop with Bob Baffert. His horses just seem to be taking a couple of races before they put it all together.
Yeah, it's unusual. It's not something we're used to seeing from Baffert, but it does seem like that's the case this year, that his horses are needing a run or two before they're really showing us the best of their capabilities. Cupid has gotten a lot of hype being an expensive tap-it out of he's a half to Indianapolis, so well bred on that front. Had the big win last time out, winning by over 5 lengths at Santa Anita. Big step up from Maiden Company. And, for me, I think this is a horse who we're going to see more from later in the year. I mean, when I see Cupid, he still looks like a big baby, and I mean that affectionately, in that the talent is there, but maybe he just doesn't have everything put together yet. He's lacking for experience, and he's lacking for maturity, and that's going to come, but this race is probably a little bit too soon.
All right, well, let's take a look. How do you think this race is going to unfold, and who are you kind of leaning towards?
For me, I'm leaning toward Danzing Candy. I like this horse. I like horses like him who, he's so versatile. He can go on the lead if no one's going to go on with it. But in a race like this where I think others will, I think he is perfectly capable of sitting in kind of a pressing spot. I think it's advantageous to him that Uncle Lionel's drawn to his inside. I think he'll go forward, and you could just sit right off of him in a pretty good position. And like I say, he just relaxes so well in running. He has that mental maturity that's very important for these horses, and something that we don't often see. So often in these races on the Kentucky Derby prep season, we see horses pulling, we see horses looking all over the place, throwing their head. And Danzing Kenny to me seems like he's really matured into the consummate professional. He's probably going to get the jump on More Spirit. He should be ahead of him in running, I'd guess. So I like Dancing Candy here. I think More Spirit's going to give him everything he has, and I wouldn't be surprised if, it's very close between the two of them. But I see Dancing Candy taking the step up against, some pretty nice horses in this spot and doing it well.
Yeah, I think Uncle Lionel got the worst of the post draw, because I think they may get forced to send a little bit quicker than they want to from the rail. One of the things I will point out about More Spirit, I can't prove this, I just noticed from his workouts and his races, I really think he's the type of horse that likes to be on the outside of horses and in the clear. And I think if this guy gets shuffled inside, or if they pin him at the rail, I could see him being a little bit of trouble. I can't predict that trip. I'm just saying that this is the type of horse I think needs to be in the clear, on the outside. If you notice in his workouts, every one of them, and what's nice, I think the last 4 workouts of his are online, either at on the YouTube channel for TVG or ExpressBet. And every time they purposely stay out in the middle of the track. On the turn, he comes out and floats out wide. And last year, American Pharoah, they took turns working him inside horses and out. Like, they seemed like they knew a little bit more about American Pharoah, and they're being a little bit more conservative with More Spirit. So that's just my note on More Spirit. I think I Will Score is going to run a good race. Out of all of the workouts last week, I love the looks of Danzing Candy. He finished like a tank, got a big, huge chest. I think he's going to get the distance. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Exaggerator in this spot. And I'm going to like Exaggerate even out of this race. I'm not so sure the best horse is going to win this race. I think this is where the Overlays is going to cure maybe in the San Felipe Derby or the Derby out of this group. I think somebody's going to get a good trip and win here. But Exaggerator just flew in that workout last week. And coming off that 7 furlong sprint, maybe ultimately he's near the pace, and I like him on the outside. So I'm going to go with Exaggerator. I just really think Danzing Candy's a good horse, and I think I Will Score is better than most people think, but I just think ultimately, again, he's going to kind of get the shaft pace-wise.
Yeah, and it's interesting you note that about More Spirit, because we've talked about these horses in the past who, are young, and every race they win it the same way. And I know More Spirit, I think the only time we saw him come up the inside was his lone loss. So, really, even if you can't prove that these horses, who are always winning, making these 3 wide moves, even if you can't prove that they don't like to run inside when they're a short price, a lot of times that they're a good bet against, because you're asking the horse to do something that they haven't shown that they're capable of doing yet, and More Spirit's going to be a short price in this spot. We've seen these sorts of things from Kaibo Prince in the Florida Derby, from Orb in the Preakness, where they get put in a situation that they haven't had to tackle before, and they underperform.
Well, there's 23 horses listed in the individual choices for the Pool 3, and 10 of them run this weekend. So I think it's going to be, out of those 10 horses, I think 2 or 3 of them will probably flop. But I think not necessarily, like judging how Brody's Cause does, judging how Tal of Saval does, somebody's going to probably get one of those sneaky trips in that San Felipe, and they're the one that's going to float up, and they're going to lose this week. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch both races, and really, and there might be a knockout performance in one of the 2 races as well, and they get really overbet. I think of the 2 races, I really don't. I think More Spirit's going to be the heavier favorite. And like I say, I just think that he's kind of not going to get the greatest trip, and I don't think they need to win as much. And I'm not so sure Brody's totally cranked up. So I think we could maybe have, a little bit of payoffs this week. Let's take a look at those off the track this week with pool number 3, and kind of any horse or 2 that you're thinking that might offer a price, and maybe you think, or you're going to play the angle that they're not running this weekend and go with them.
For me, the horse that I like is a horse who isn't running this weekend, and he's a newcomer to the pool in general. That's American Dubai. I really liked his run last time out. Obviously copied the worst of what ended up being a pretty fast pace. I think a lot of people from that race are going to take Whitmore, who made the big middle move, and I can't blame them. I liked his run as well, but I thought American Dubai really had to deal with the worst of it there at Oaklawn, and I thought he stayed on extremely well. He's a horse to me that I think that he showed he's going to stay further, and he got points there, and I think that if he's handled with a better pace scenario next time, he could potentially win. He was just put in a position where there was nothing he was going to be able to do. He's stuck on the inside, dealing with an extremely fast pace, and at the end of the day, he was the only horse who ran that far forward who was anywhere near the finish. So he's more than like 50 to 1. I wouldn't be surprised if he drifted a little bit, just because people don't seem to be talking about him. And like I said, people seem to be pulling Whitmore as the one to watch out of that race. But for me, the one to watch was American Dubai.
Yeah, in pool 2, I was really high on Danzing Candy. In this pool, I am going to go a little bit on Whitmore. I think that he's going to, I think both the Oaklawn horses are going to float up to 70 or 80 to 1. And so I think you could make the case for both, but thought Whitmore got caught with a little bit of an early move. Mike Smith, it was a good move. I think he made it at the right time. He just ultimately got passed by sudden breaking news. And I think you could make a case, sudden breaking news doesn't seem to be jumping up everybody's radar either. So, maybe those three, and kind of just hope that form holds and try to get a couple of them in the gate on Derby Day, because I think sudden breaking news could probably still be 30 to 1 in this pool.
Yeah, I agree. Sudden breaking news, I don't know. I'm a little bit mixed feelings from him, because the move he made was extremely eye-catching, but at the same time, he probably got the best of a pace that completely collapsed. Whitmore, like I say, his move was so eye-catching in there. But, how confident are you in him staying 10 furlongs? Because maybe that's what was worrisome to me, is he came there, and for one, heading to the gate, he looked cranked. He looked like a monster. He looked completely fit, that was his race. Did he run his race? Is there a potential that he bottomed himself out in there with that big performance?
Well, that's kind of what I don't think he bottomed himself out, but I agree with you. I loved his 6 furlong win, and I thought that they did have him totally cranked for that race, and it's kind of disappointing because he ran a winning race and they just got out finished by sudden breaking news, who beats him from the 13 hole. Sometimes you have everything go to plan and it doesn't work. Life happens when you have a plan sometimes. So I don't think he bottomed himself out. I just do think he was especially cranked for that race.
Yeah, it seems like we're on the same page, though. We like horses from the same race, so maybe Oaklawn is where the form is coming from at this point. I think that they have a good group. It seems like everyone's looking elsewhere for the stars, but I wonder if the most competitive group from top to bottom is the group there at Oaklawn.
Well, I think from top to bottom it could be, and they've got a deeper well, so it seems like, just from that. I do think a horse that, if he loses this week, could float up a little bit is Exaggerator. I'm picking him, but I think there's a lot of people that are wavering on him. And I think if he lost, but if you could find a reason why he lost and he finishes second, third, or fourth, I could see him going right up to 30 to 35 to 1 as well. And I think they're going to run. I think he's one of those, the owner and the trainer and the job. I think they're going to the Derby no matter what.
For you, when you look at the list, is there any one horse that, at least based off the morning line, you look and you say, whoa, that horse is a huge underlay in this pool?
Well, nobody that I see as an underlay. I'm not a fan of a few, like Smokey's Image. I don't like because of his stride. So to me, he's an underlay. But I think if he loses on Saturday, it won't matter. I guess if he wins, it would matter, because I still think his stride is going to catch up to him eventually. So maybe that's the angle. If Smokey's Image somehow wins on Saturday, I still think he's kind of a fade in Pool 4 and on Derby Day, or in the Santa Anita Derby.
Mm-hmm. What do you think affects it the most? Do you think it's more affected if a horse like Brody's Cause or More Spirit, who people know are good, wins? Or do you think if someone like Cupid, who people want to be good, wins? Which do you think has more of an effect on the pools?
I think Cupid. A Cupid win. I think people are looking for talent here. I think a horse like Brody's Cause and More Spirit, you're going to get 10 to 1 in Pool 4 anyways. I don't think their odds is going to be affected too much. I think Brody will be under a little bit more scrutiny because, like I say, I think More Spirit is just a good horse. And, they don't have to win on every prep. If they do, it kind of does start to put that top group of, if More Spirit wins, boy, that's a pretty tough threesome between Moynihan, Nyquist, and More Spirit. But if he loses, that kind of opens up that West Coast. And there's 5 horses kind of vying for the king of the West Coast, and we don't really know who it is yet.
Oh, that certainly seems to be the case to me. And I think that's what makes More Spirit a little bit of the bet against here, not for just the reasons you stated, that you think he prefers it outside of horses and isn't going to get that here, but also because, like you said, he's probably going to be the shorter favorite of the two, big preps this weekend, and he, I think, easily faces a tougher field.
Yeah, and he faces other speed and some good jockeys and horses that, like, you know, we talked about this before, like sometimes horses can win race. Like you go into a race and you anticipate it being a really good race, and then it's just not. Like, I just think the San Felipe is going to be a dogfight. I mean, I just think, like I said, I really like I Will Score. I think this horse, Hollendorfer's got him. I mean, 6 furlong workout after 6 furlong workout. I mean, this horse is going to be tough. I mean, he didn't give up that easy the last time. Then you add in like a Smokey's Image, who's never lost, and whether he's got a great stride or not, he can go a mile. Exaggerator never runs a bad race. More Spirit, it kind of, you know, Danzing Candy is, you know, working and looking the part of a, I mean, that's who you're picking, and I think he's going to run a great race. Like, the Tampa Bay race could come up flat because 2 or 3 of those layoff horses may just not run, but I can't see none of these top 5 not running at San Felipe. Like, they're going to run good.
I mean, that's how I see it as well. Even if 1 or 2 of them doesn't run up to their par to this point, you know, there's so many good ones in that race that it's going to be a horse race no matter what. I think the main thing in the San Felipe you want to see in particular is that when you have so many good horses, you really in a race typically want to see margins of victory there. So you want to see someone win clearly, a little bit of a gap, somebody else a little bit of a gap. It's when you have 3 horses on the wire that then you get worried that this is not a strong race or that this race isn't going to hold form, because it's just so rare that that happens when you get those type finishes. So I think for this race to hold form and for us to really think these horses are as good as we think them, we pretty much want an outright winner here.
Well, I'm looking forward to both the Tampa Bay card, the Santa Anita card, Big Cap Day. Sounds like there may be a chance of some rain at Tampa Bay, but hopefully not. They've got a pretty star-studded card and some deep fields all the way through. Santa Anita Handicap, I mean, it's missing the big dogs, but at least they ended up getting a couple of horses to kind of fill in there. And our old pals like Hard Aces and Point Piper and horses like that are in there, and Donworth. So maybe somebody steps up. And I thought the San Carlos, you know, I think there's some of the old timers are in there, but then there's some of the young, there's some horses that really seem to like 7 furlongs in that race. I think that's going to be a good race as well.
Yeah, they have a good card altogether. I thought the Kilroy Mile got a really good field as well, and the China Doll. So I'm going to be out there, so I'm excited. I think it's a really good group that they have all together. And I know people are kind of slating the Big Cap, but they pretty much got everybody who's running and not in Dubai. So I thought they did pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, they got all the horses that are in training at this point ready to run. And you know, you saw 4 or 5 horses run at Gulfstream last week, but I mean, horses don't normally ship from Gulfstream to Santa Anita. So the fact that they got General A-Rod to come over, I think that's good. And FNX, I mean, like it or not, he's, you know, he ran second in the Breeders' Cup and he backed it up with a big victory in the Clark. So FNX is kind of, you know, maybe it just took a while to get him up there. Plus, you know, he had some nice races last year that were big. And the only thing is the day that you touted him on Belmont was the day that he decided to bolt.
Exactly. So I won't be touting FNX. Condolences to Connections, who the one time I picked him is the one race where he just completely bolted on the turn, something he's never done before and has never done since.
So yeah, that was kind of a wacko day. Because remember, right, you had 2 horses that decided to bolt that day.
Yeah, story of my life.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to next week. We got the Rebel Yell, and then 2 weeks from now, we're going to go down to the Swamp, Louisiana, for the Louisiana Derby. And then hopefully at that time, we might see the big matchup, Nyquist and Moy Men coming up later on this month. And then we got the Spiral still, and then the Wood and the Bluegrass and Santa Anita. So a lot of big prep still to come. And I think we're going to narrow down out of these 10 contenders down to 4 or 5 good ones this weekend. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.